How do you see Oleksandr Usyk as a heavyweight? We've only seen him twice as a heavyweight, against Chaz Witherspoon in a fight where I think he was supposed to box Tyrone Spong. Of course, Tyrone Spong failed a drugs test beforehand, so it was a late replacement. Then we saw him over in October of last year against Derek Chisora. So we've not seen an awful lot of him as a heavyweight. You mentioned there about burnout. We have seen Oleksandr Usyk suffer some injuries. I think he had a bicep injury, I think a shoulder injury as well. But do you feel that size is the greatest factor in this fight?
I do. Yeah, because I think had Usyk, or if we look at it another way, if Joshua was 2 stone lighter, then I think we'd all be fancying Usyk to win this one and win it well. But I think Anthony Joshua, has settled on, if not an optimum weight, then a range within which he produces his best. And I remember way back, and I've said this on previous podcasts, but Lennox Lewis once said after a mediocre performance that there's an optimum weight at which a heavyweight can operate, beyond which they can't make their way around the ring, particularly if they're of that kind of style where fluency and good footwork and ring generalship is really important. And this applies to Tyson Fury also. But there comes a point at which they can't operate at their best if they're too heavy. And I know Anthony Joshua has been thinking about that because of similar instances. I pretty much remember it was Carlos Takam where he weighed in.
Yeah, it was very heavy.
Much heavier than previously. And I know that was a late substitution, so that was a difficult one for him. But I do think that he's now settled on where he can operate best. And I like the idea that since the setback against Andy Ruiz, he's spoken about more boxing. I said to him in the build-up to the rematch against Andy Ruiz, what have you done differently? And it was just those 2 words, more boxing. It was much less about building the Adonis figure and putting the finishing touches to that statuesque figure. And I think that will serve him really well and will have served him well over the course of time. And it might well be that because he is such a student and so keen to learn, that actually the pandemic might have helped Anthony Joshua. I was very impressed by what he did against Kubrat Pulev, I have to say, although some people weren't and dismissed what sort of a challenge Pulev offered. But I think that the time in the gym will have served him really well. And we should remember that in the modern age, these men fight only twice a year anyway. So you can overplay the effects of ring rust and time away from the ring. Because if you look back at the records of all of them, whether it's, Canelo at the moment is pursuing a slightly different path, but Mayweather, De La Hoya, Joshua through much of his world championship status career, they box only twice a year. So you can overplay the importance and I think the relevance and the effect of ring rust.
We've seen in the, you mentioned the Andy Ruiz rematch there, where we saw Anthony Joshua adopt a style that we hadn't really seen from him as a professional in that bout. And I think it carried over somewhat into the Kubrat Pulev fight, where we saw him box at range. We also saw him obviously letting his hands go on the inside. What do you think is going to be the plan of attack for Oleksandr Usyk? Obviously a naturally smaller man than Anthony Joshua. Do you think we'll see Anthony Joshua revert slightly more to the more aggressive Anthony Joshua? Or do you think that post Ruiz 1, that Joshua maybe is not as likely to come out given what happened that night in New York?
Yeah, I was working on 5 Live for the fight against Pulev with 1,000 fans at Wembley, and I was working with Steve Bunce and Dillian White. And Dillian White came out with a phrase and said he believes Joshua is in between styles. And it was clear that he was trying to find this groove, if you like, this happy medium between the boxer that picked off Andy Ruiz in the second fight and the more aggressive Joshua that we'd become used to seeing. And I think we'll see more of that process on the night. I think that there'll be no inclination to go looking for Usyk. That's my view. I think he'll try to use his boxing skills, not necessarily to outbox Usyk, but to get home with those solid punches that get Usyk's respect early on, and maybe even make Usyk slightly wary of launching attacks of his own. I happen to think that the man who holds the centre of the ring here will be really important. Now, I know Usyk is very clever at boxing in the pocket and swivelling and making himself elusive around that close-knit area. But I think that if Joshua holds and dominates from the centre, then he can win this fight, and he can win it well. But there are endless possibilities because of the ability of Oleksandr Usyk. And there is just this guessing game that we have, as you know, how has he grown as a heavyweight? I mean, I was one of those who, for the fight against Chisora, thought it was one-sided. I thought that Usyk won it comfortably.
As did I, yeah.
A lot of people at ringside, very close to ringside, said otherwise. But I thought Usyk was a comfortable winner, and that is a yardstick. And I think that for him was an invaluable experience as a heavyweight after the waste of time against Chaz Witherspoon in his first venture. So I think that Usyk clearly has grown into the division, and with all the science that's been available to not just the Ukrainians, but going back decades and decades to the Soviet Union, and which has been not so much stolen, but taken by the rest of the world since then. You know, all of that will have served him well in terms of building the body to suit. And I spoke about Anthony Joshua having or looking for an optimum weight. That will have been part of the process for Usyk as well, to make sure that he's only as heavy as he can possibly be and still perform at his cruiserweight best. That's the key for them, that they want to retain so much of that cruiserweight finesse, the speed, the agility, the thinking space, and not slow down any of those processes in the quest to move up in weight successfully, without at the same time, you know, forgetting that he has to have a greater degree of strength to take the punches that inevitably are going to get home.
One of the things that I've spoken to people I've met, so you will have met Oleksandr Usyk on numerous occasions in the past, and one of the things that I was immediately taken by was just how thick set he was when meeting him. He is not your, you know, you kind of sometimes will get these fighters. Isaac Chamberlain just popped into my head as somebody who's probably is too big for 175 and maybe slightly too small for 200, whereas you have an Oleksandr Usyk, a Lawrence Okoli, who we've also spoken about, who are really small heavyweights who have boiled themselves down to cruiserweight. Usyk is not a small man. I think it's fair to say that anybody who's getting hit on the chin by an ex-Olympic gold medalist, undisputed cruiserweight champion is going to feel it. Do you feel he has the punching power on the night to hurt Anthony Joshua, to get his respect?
He has the punching power to get his respect. Whether he has the punching power to hurt him, I don't know. I mean, I would say that somebody who hits as well as he does, and with even 14 and a half, 15 stone behind it is going to hurt when he lands cleanly. But in terms of the relative nature of what Joshua has taken in the heavyweight division, I think he would have to hit him often to really make a difference. But if you look back at Usyk's amateur career and this kind of hybrid event between the amateurs or the Olympic style boxing and the professional ranks, the World Series of Boxing, when they fought over 5 rounds. If you look at film of his contest against Joe Joyce, he doesn't look like the smaller man, he doesn't look like the weaker man, but he still looks like the quicker man, he still looks like the cleverer man. Now, Joe Joyce, I get it, isn't Anthony Joshua, but I'm just saying, you saw there from a man, Usyk, who was still having to come down to the heavyweight poundage in those amateur days, and the heavyweight poundage coincidentally is 14 stone 4, which is the cruiserweight
limit, yeah,
as a pro. So he was still having to move up, come down, move up. So when he was going up to fight the likes of Joe Joyce, that wouldn't have been a long drawn out process like we're seeing now, in terms of the scientific background and the months and months of being able to chisel the body into the super heavyweight shape. That would have been just moving up because he wanted to test himself for the good of the team. And so if you look at that, he didn't look at all out of place as a heavyweight, whether in terms of size or speed. He didn't lose. Okay, it was only over 5 rounds, but he didn't lose any of the qualities that we've known him for. And I think that, you know, it's important to use all of those markers, any clues that we can find as to what might happen on Saturday night. But I can't tell you whatever I've been looking back at and you know, working out, trying to find the answers. It's still that tingle when they walk to the ring on Saturday night will still be there, because he could do it with one shot. Who knows? He could be the new dominant force in the heavyweight division.
I don't know if you're a betting man, but if you were a betting man, where would you put your money in this fight?
I'd put it on Joshua points.